Well, welcome to Huddersfield Town Hall and welcome to the Henry Willis, the Father Willis concert organ, which is always seen as you walk in the door here at the Town Hall. The first thing you see is the wonderful Willis organ. And I'm Gordon Stewart, I'm the Borough Organist here. I've been privileged to play this organ for the last 30 years. This would have been my 30th season, or is my 30th season, although it's not live in the hall. We thought for the first of these unusual events, we would do something slightly different, and I would talk about the organ, answer some of the questions that I've had from audience members over the years, and let you hear some of the sounds of the organ and a bit of music. But to begin, I welcome my very good friend, David Wood, the organ builder, the managing director of Wood of Huddersfield, who's going to tell us just a bit about this fascinating organ. Well, it's great to welcome to the Town Hall David Wood, but you're no stranger to the hall. You've spent most of your summer here, it seems to me, working on the organ. But your company have looked after the organ here for about 25 years now, I think.
Indeed, yes. We've looked after the organ for over 25 years. I'm very proud to do so. It's a fabulous organ.
Where did it come from? Because there's this story that goes around that the organ, there was a new town hall, but that the organ wasn't new.
Indeed it wasn't. The town was blessed with a prosperous firm of organ builders in those days called Peter Conacher and Company, who were just up the road. And Peter Conacher, the managing director himself, was a councillor. So when the council were looking for an organ, they asked for some advice from an eminent organist called Walter Parrott, another son of Huddersfield, who recommended that an organ recently installed in a hall in Newport in Wales, which had come onto the market as that hall had gone into financial trouble, was available and would be ideal for the town hall. So that's how this organ arrived in Huddersfield. Every rank of pipes in this organ has a little inscription on the bottom which says Newport.
Is that so? I never knew that. That's fantastic. So the hall wasn't completed then, and
no.
Was it then slightly changed?
The hall was slightly adapted to accommodate this organ,
the,
which is unusual.
Yeah.
Usually, organ builders are forced to put organs in a space that architects have chosen for them to install the organ.
Yeah.
Here, the organ was given prime position, and the hall adapted so it could fit in.
And it looks perfect.
It looks as if it was made for this building.
It does.
But actually, it was the other way around.
Yeah, and I feel that the cubic capacity of that hall in Wales must have been almost identical to this, because the organ is exactly the right volume.
It is. It is in kind.
And it's been used by all our famous choirs here and our brass bands and everything. And it's been very much part of the life of this town, and very important as part of that. You've kept it in remarkable condition, but one of the questions that members of the audience ask me when they're leaving regularly is, how many pipes are there inside an organ? You talk about all these stops and things. How many pipes are there in an organ of this size? And sometimes you see them trying to count the ones that you can see, and they think that's the organ. How many pipes are there inside this organ, David?
Well, it's perfectly understandable that you would sit in the audience and look at the organ and think that that's what you were listening to, these splendid decorated pipes in front of us. But they are a fraction of the pipe work involved in this organ. Every one of these pipes speaks. There are no dummies or shams, as we call them. Each one forms part of the tonal scheme of this organ. But behind the 40 or 50 pipes you can see here, there are actually over 4,000 pipes in the organ. In fact,
just say that again.
Over 4,000 pipes in the organ, ranging from 32 feet long to a fraction of an inch.
Isn't that remarkable? And each of them has a different character. I always think with this organ that there's not an awful lot that's there duplicated from somewhere else. So although the organ isn't huge, it's not like Liverpool Cathedral or the Albert Hall, every stop has its function and does it just beautifully. And I'll look forward to demonstrating that a bit later. Just to explain in very simple terms, when the organist puts the keys down there, what happens between there and these 4,000 pipes speaking? And if you can do that in about 1.5 minutes, that would be perfect.
Well, organ actions vary greatly. They can either be purely mechanical, where the key moves and a series of rods and levers moves within the organ to open a valve to let air into the pipes. That's called mechanical or tracker action. Here it is electro-pneumatic. The keyboard on an organ such as this has become a switch. At the back of this key is a set of contacts, and when you depress the key 10 millimeters, the contacts make, and the first thing that happens, my box of tricks, is a small electromagnet, and these are exactly the ones which are in here, will move like that. And that small movement is then translated to a valve. This valve will move up and down about 10 millimeters itself, maybe 15 at the most. After that, a pneumatic motor, which at rest is up here, will collapse like that. From this hook eye here, a linkage will go to a valve which opens and lets air into the pipe. That has to happen like that, and it has to be repeated very, very quickly when the organist demands it to. So that's 1.5 minutes, Gordon.
You have explained that quite brilliantly, but I know that this summer, at the end of last season, we were having some problems with the organ.
Yeah.
And one of the great things I think they've done here is that they've kept the organ in beautiful condition all the time. There are some places where they've allowed the organ to gradually become less and less reliable, and at the end of that had to spend sometimes over £1 million to do a restoration.
Yeah.
Here, I think that the authorities here have been fantastic in keeping the instruments, the pianos and the organ, in wonderful condition. But we were having problems at the end of last season. We were losing some notes. And could you just explain the work that you did in maintaining the organ over the summer to make it reliable for this season?
Well, you're absolutely right in that music's always been so important to Huddersfield, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, from the Choral Society and the university and the very many amateur bodies that there are here. And the council has always made sure that the organ is available and in great working condition to do that.
Yeah.
But this is a pneumatic motor, and as you can see, it's hinged with leather, and this is sheepskin, which is applied round this pneumatic motor. And it has, over the last 50 years, you can imagine every time a note is played, it has to do that. And eventually, after 50 years, the corners and the edges will start to wear very thin, and we'll need to replace that leather. We've tried using all sorts of substances, man-made fabrics, plastics, none of which work. We find that the leather is supple, it keeps its strength for up to 50 years, as indeed the last lot had. But when holes develop in here, and you require this to move down, it refuses to do so, and the wind will just pour through it, and nothing will happen. So that's what had happened. At the end of last year, we had notes off on at least 3 of the 5 divisions.
Yeah.
So we were able to come in the summer and remove nearly 500 of these pneumatic motors, and sit at workshop, socially distanced, the two of us, Michael Leadbeater and I, and re-leather the whole organ. So that was an ideal opportunity to do it, and the organ is now re-leathered entirely from top to bottom, and will go on for another 50 years or so. This is the sheepskin we use. It's very, very good quality, very carefully treated, and will last, let's say, 50 years.
It's just fantastic. Well, could you just, winding this up, because this has been fantastic, it's exactly what we needed to know. Inside the organ, and I'm going to be demonstrating the different families of stops,
Yeah.
what we call the families of stops, there are not 4,000 pipes this size inside the organ.
Quite.
So I see in your little box here that you've brought one or two examples of
Sure.
different kinds of pipes
Yes.
and different sizes of pipes.
Okay. Well, the pipes that you see here all make their sound in the same way. In that when our motor collapses and lets air through into the pipe, the wind will come up to the mouth, and much like a recorder, there are no moving parts in that pipe. The air will be directed onto the top lip and it will make a noise. The noise that it makes depends on its length, its scale, and what it's made of.
And the difference between a pipe and a recorder is that the pipe will only play one note.
Exactly.
So if you
Depending on
want
its length.
another note, you've got to have another pipe.
Precisely.
There is no mechanism for
No.
opening and closing holes on the pipe.
No. The longest pipe that you see in the facade here, in the front, is 16 feet long, and I'm sure you'll demonstrate what that sounds like. It goes from side to side. Bottom C is over here, and bottom C sharp is right in front of us here. The longest pipe on the organ is 32 feet long. The 32-foot reed on the pedal goes down and is from where it makes its sound to the end of the pipe is 32 feet. The shortest pipe is actually one like this. The speaking part of this pipe is actually that tiny little bit there. So from there to there, well, what's that? In old money, that would be 3/8 of an inch, perhaps less, and it makes a very high-pitched noise like this. And some people can't hear those high-pitched noises, but they form a very important part of the organ's makeup.
Yeah, and I'll be talking a bit about building choruses and where those small pipes
Yeah.
come
I
into
don't think it's
all of
particularly
that.
helpful to say people can't hear them. What did you say that for?
Well, but they don't.
No.
You know, people,
That's true.
as they get older, those very high pitches go. So that's all the what we call diapasons or principals,
Yeah.
all the flutes,
All
all
the
the
same
string
noise,
stops are all that same principle, and it's the wide, the way they're voiced,
Yeah.
the width of the pipe that affects the sound.
Right.
But there's another kind of,
There is.
there's a whole other family.
There's a whole other family.
And this is very weird, because I think this is where people are confused in that what we would call brass instruments in the orchestra and woodwind instruments, the reed instruments like clarinets and oboes, in the organ, they all function in the same way.
Correct. Yeah. Well, given that the organ, this type of symphonic organ was developed so that people could play transcriptions of major orchestral works, you find many orchestral instruments reproduced within the organ. And this is a typical example. This is an oboe, not an oboe that you would expect to see in an orchestra, but as near as the organ building world can come to making that sound. And this, unlike our flue stops, has moving parts and creates the sound in a completely different way. This time, when the air travels up through this boot, it hits a small sliver of brass called a tongue there. And because that tongue is very, very slightly curved, it tries to flatten it against this hollow tube which is called a shallot. So it flattens it against the shallot, but because it's curved it springs back. And then it flattens it again, and does that very, very many times. So it's a striking reed hitting this block that you hear. This tube here is merely an amplifier of what happens down here. The scale of it, what it's made of, its diameter, how long it is, determines the note that you'll hear. The spring determines how much of the tongue will beat. It should be approximately there, and it will make a note entirely unlike any of the flues. It's actually too flat. And that's an oboe.
And a trumpet would work on exactly the same principle.
Exactly.
And even a tuba.
A clarinet, a tuba, trumpets,
same.
all the same, all with brass reeds in them, striking reeds.
When I was inside the organ at the Wanamaker store in America, which is probably the biggest playing organ in the world, inside the solo organ there were pipes of shapes I'd never seen. They looked almost like fireworks, some of them. And they were saxophones and all sorts of... Somebody works out that if you make that pipe that shape, that's the sound you'll get.
Yes.
But the actual bit at the bottom of it would be the same as...
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is
so
quite
the
fascinating.
resonator, as we call it, will determine what sort of sound it makes.
Yeah.
You could have anything from a French horn to a trumpet militaire. So,
I think, David, as an explanation of how an organ works, this is going to be shown around the world. People are going to be fascinated by a very clear explanation of what we do. And of course, different builders have used different kinds of actions. After mechanical action, the French organs had something called Barker lever, which was a remarkable thing developed by
Charles Spackman Barker, a telephone engineer. Yeah. Who took his ideas.
Who knew this man?
Who knew this man, indeed.
Yeah.
He knew Henry Willis.
And just say a bit about why we call him. The great thing about this hall, it is unique in the world. I bet this is the only hall where the bar is named after the organ builder.
Yes, sadly, it's the only one.
Yeah.
Yes. They,
There's no David Wood at
no,
the bar.
and neither will there be. But yes, Father Henry Willis was the founder of the dynasty of the Willis family, who built organs and continue to build organs throughout the world. And this was one of his early concert hall organs. And much of it remains. Much of the sound that you hear is as it would have been built in 1865.
And his other big organs, St Paul's Cathedral, Royal Albert Hall, originally
Reading Town Hall.
Reading Town
Yeah.
Hall.
Yeah.
Lots of cathedrals,
Absolutely.
including my favourite at Truro,
Yeah.
which is quite small, but just
All held in great regard.
Yeah.
But
wonderful.
we're the only
instruments.
one to name the bar after the organ builder.
I think that's a great way to end this interview, David. It's been great to talk to you about
Great
all
pleasure.
of that, and thank you for explaining it all. And I'll be talking, after a short break, I'll be talking about the repertoire that we're going to have this season and all the things that are going to happen. It's very odd for me being in the hall recording with no audience, and we're missing them very much. We look forward to them all being back
Yeah.
whenever. But we'll do our best to keep the organ sounding, and actually, if I'm honest, it'll be heard by people who would never hear it generally. I already know that people are planning to listen in America, South Africa and Australia, and they're very excited to hear the organ. So there will be the pluses of the close down. You were able to get into the hall because it was closed for concerts. You were able to do the maintenance, and we're able now to go out.
Yeah.
As Nicholas Parsons would have said, all round the world. playing at the console. And an organ like this, a town hall organ, a concert organ, would normally have at least 4 keyboards. And people ask me why. Pianists manage with 1. We can have all of these keyboards set up with different stops. I suppose a quick explanation of the word stop. The earliest kind of organ that we could describe was called a blockwerk. And on a blockwerk, all the pipes that played any given notes always sounded. And gradually they put in a mechanism that meant you could stop some of those ranks of pipes off. And so the mechanism became a stop. On an organ now, I suppose they should really be called starts. Nothing happens on any keyboard until you pull out one of the stops, like that. On this organ, the main keyboard, which we call the great, the French would call the grand orgue, is the second one up. The next one up from there is the swell, and the pipes of that are enclosed in a box. I will explain that later. This one is called the solo, and on the solo we get the stops like the clarinet and the oboe. And the very bottom one, which on a British organ would normally be called the choir, sometimes on the continent that would be called the positive. This division is the one section of the organ that was not built by Henry Willis, but was actually built by Harrison's in 1980. Each of these divisions has its own character, and this section, a more intimate sound, this, the very grand sounds, this, a very full sound, we actually call it full swell, but also some very quiet stops. In fact, the quietest stops on the organ, and this one, as I say, the solo colours, beautiful flutes. The pipes you can see on the case are actually the pipes of this stop here, which is the open diapason 16 of the great. And the sound of that is very rich. It is an octave lower than the pitch of a piano of concert pitch. The way that it works on an organ is you then build up a chorus from there, bringing in different pitches. Each pitch is the next of the harmonic series. So on top of that, I would put the open diapason number 1. On top of that, the principal 4, then the 12th, then the 2-foot, then the mixture. Now the effect of that, if I couple that down to the pedal and pull out some pedal stops, this is the sound, the great sound that you might expect to hear when you go to church and you hear hymns played on a full great. That sound can be replicated in a similar way on each manual. Down here on the choir, and up here on the swell. Because the solo has a different reason for being there, it doesn't have a chorus of that kind on this organ. The sound of all those pipes is made in the same way. As David Wood was saying, they work on the same principle as a recorder or a penny whistle. The other stops that do that are the flutes. And the flutes on this organ are absolutely stunningly beautiful. And we have flutes on all manuals. The great actually has 2. The swell, and on the solo, a fabulous flute harmonique. And there's a 4-foot flute. and a 2-foot. The pedal I'll talk about later. It has all those same things, flutes. One more very small family of stops are called the strings, often played 2 ranks of pipes, not quite in tune, beating together. We call that voix celeste. We have 2 sets of celestes here. And this set on the solo. The next family of stops are the reeds, and as David Wood was explaining, these are all made with a brass reed hitting against a shallot, and then the shape of the pipe and the way they're voiced then makes them. We have trumpets on all manuals on this organ. They have different names, but we have this trumpet on the choir, this trumpet on the swell, this trumpet on the grate, and then the one on the solo, the grand tuba, probably the loudest tuba in the north of England apart from York Minster. We can play about with those. On the swell, when I have the reed stops, because they're all enclosed in a big room with vertical shutters on the front, I can open and close those shutters and get this effect. And that's all achieved with this big pedal above the pedal board. And that is used to great effect in pieces like well, although the organ has 4 manuals, in fact, it has 5 because, well, it has 4 manuals and 1 pedal board. There's another keyboard down here, laid out exactly the same as these and played with the feet. People often say to me that it's very clever that you can do all that with your feet, and I point out that actually it was designed to be played by the feet, so that isn't terribly clever. It's just what you need to practice doing. Nobody moves the pedal board during the concert, so if it was G there before, it'll still be G now. The pedal works in exactly the same way with a principal chorus and with flutes. Everything on this division is an octave lower, as if it were the double basses of the orchestra. Some of the open stops are very powerful, and they are sitting underneath, as it were, the double bass section of a symphony orchestra. The various 16 foots, that's the pitch of the double basses, can be quite fluty, or they can be slightly more edgy, and we call that stringy. That's a V alone. And this is the cello 8. The pedal has its own reeds, and the reeds on the pedal on this organ are extremely enthusiastic, to say the least. This is the 4-foot, which was added by Harrison's in 1980. Which is really a 4-foot trumpet. Here is the trumpet 8. On this organ, the stops, which are going to make a lot of noise, are called grand. And this is the Grand Ophicleide. That underneath full organ, when you have most of the stops out, is a very solid sound. But there are moments where you want something even more solid. So you have not the pitch of the double basses, but the pitch an octave lower than that. So going from 8 foot, you would go down here. To 16. So that pipe I'm playing now is 16 feet long. To 32 foot. Which sounds very odd when it's played by itself. But when it's played with full organ, it's a pretty exciting sound. Well, I suppose I should just explain a bit more about the console, and then I'll talk a bit about how the season's going to go. On an organ like this, none of this would have been here on the organ of Henry Willis, because this is a computerized system for the organ remembering what you want. So I can set up my own settings for each of these underneath each manual, and they will affect the stops. That means, and this makes good television, I can pull out all the stops I want there just by pressing that one button. And they will also affect the pedal, and I know that I have set this all up myself. I know exactly what will come out when I press each one of those buttons, and they just affect the stops for that particular keyboard. The names are above the tops of the stops. There has been a development in all of this, which means that I can set up these, the ones off to the left, are called generals. They don't just affect one manual, they affect the whole organ. And I can have these set up in 114 different ways. And I can go from one to the next. If I set up my first registration thus, and my second registration is that, I can do that just by pressing one of the plus buttons anywhere on the organ like that. And there's even one that I can press with my feet. If I'm completely stuck and I'm playing with both feet and both hands and there's a registration change, I can have a stop. My page turner can press a plus button there. And if for some reason I've gone too far and I need to go back one, he can take me back one there. That makes life very much more simple and allows me to get exactly the colour I want at any given time. So that is the Harrison organ here at the Town Hall. I think it would be nice just to hear a piece of music now using some of the colour of the organ. We've talked about the organ, and it was great to have David here, and thank you to him for coming and spending some time, and thank you to his company for the wonderful work they've done over the summer. Looking forward to the season, the next concert, they're just about every 2 weeks. The next one will be effectively the first concert of the season, and that's me playing, opening with an overture and ending with a toccata with some very interesting music on the way through. As usual, some new things as well as some old things and some Bach in there. Then after that, I'm welcoming back my good friend Tom Osborne, the trumpet player, who's put together a really fascinating program, everything from the Baroque to 20th century film music and beyond that to some show music for the cornet, taking him back to his brass band days. So that's going to be fun. After that, I'm doing a more or less all French program, and all the concerts between now and Christmas will be played by me. When we get into the new year, if we're back in the hall, then we'll be having the concerts here with some visiting players, including our great friend Margaret Phillips. If not, we'll be doing those online as well. I hope you've enjoyed this little guide to the organ, and I hope you're able to join us for the other concerts this week. I already know that there are people looking forward to our concerts in Australia, South Africa, America and Canada. So we'll be heard in places we're not normally. Anyway, from Huddersfield Town Hall,